Hi there. Thanks for stopping by. My name is Cyberpunk, and welcome to the Matrix. It's been said that war makes strange bedfellows. Nothing unites different kinds of people quite like a shared enemy. World War II saw just that, with the world at risk of being dominated by the Axis powers, with fascism and racist ideologies, and nuclear weapons. We're all familiar with the important battles of World War II fought by soldiers, especially the ones featured in movies. Today, we'll be focusing on 3 minority persons or groups, persecuted at one time or another by their home countries, that played a big role in helping the Allies win World War II. Full disclosure, I am coming at this topic from the perspective of an American. Alright, let's begin. Everyone knows Einstein was a really smart guy that came up with E = mc squared, and a lot of quotes that may or may not be him. Trying to talk about Einstein is kind of like trying to talk about the Beatles, in the sense that they influenced literally everything that came after, so the hype around them starts to sound pretty unbelievable after a while. Here's a very brief summary of why Einstein is such a big deal. In May 1905, Einstein published his work on the theory of relativity, and would continue to publish further findings. His work pretty much turned science on its head. The main points were, there is no such thing as absolute time or absolute space, in contradiction to Newton's laws. Measurements are all relative, depending on the person measuring and the object measured. Same goes for the flow of time. Everyone experiences the flow of time differently. Also, the absoluteness of light. The speed of light is the same in all directions, no matter who is observing it. There were some findings that come as a result that Einstein would later be proven correct for, including the existence of black holes, gravitational waves, and the expanding universe. So, what does all this have to do with World War II? Well, Einstein happened to be visiting the United States in February 1933, when Hitler came to power in Germany. What did the Nazis think of Einstein's work? They were having none of it. Germany fired Jewish professors and burned books by Jewish authors, including Einstein. Here's the craziest thing to me. They tried to discredit Einstein and other Jewish physicists by calling their work Jewish physics. Yes, Jewish physics. That was actually a thing. It's so ridiculous that I'm never going to get over it. In response, Einstein, with the help of UK Prime Minister Winston Churchill and others, helped get Jewish scientists out of Germany and to the United Kingdom and Turkey. The number of refugees came to a total of 1,000 individuals. In the process of oppressing the Jews, Germany had effectively brain-drained itself of some of its best physicists, to the direct benefit of the Allies. When nuclear fission was discovered in 1938, Einstein and other scientists feared that Germany would develop a nuclear bomb and use it to win the war. Einstein sent a warning in a signed letter to US President Roosevelt, and in response, the Manhattan Project was started for the US to be the first country to develop nuclear weapons. In the end, the United States developed nuclear weapons first, involving many Jewish physicists, including lead scientist Oppenheimer. 2 nuclear weapons were dropped on Japan, killing an estimated 226,000 civilians to end World War II. While nuclear weapons haven't been used in war since, we continue to live in a world where countries are capable of ending the world several times over, and the Wikipedia list for nuclear attack close calls is way too fucking long. It's clearly documented how conflicted Einstein was over nuclear weapons. I can't help but wonder if he ever realized how much of an impact he had just from helping Jewish scientists leave Germany. In 1954, a year before his death, Einstein said to his old friend, Linus Pauling, "I made one great mistake in my life. When I signed the letter to President Roosevelt, recommending that atom bombs be made. But there was some justification: the danger that the Germans would make them. As far as scientists go, Alan Turing isn't as commonly known as Einstein, but in my view, he really should be. He developed a lot of what came to be modern computers, which pretty much define our entire lives at this point. Turing was born in London in the year 1912, and from very early on, his teachers noted his early genius, particularly in math and science. While attending King's College in Cambridge for his undergraduate degree, he published his Turing proof in 1936. He wrote about Turing machines, a computing machine capable of performing any math operation if presented as an algorithm. His work on Turing machines and Turing completeness laid the foundation for modern computers. When World War II started, Turing was working on breaking German codes at Bletchley Park. The Axis powers were using the Enigma machine to encode their messages, which was a German invention from the end of World War I. Within weeks of starting at Bletchley Park, Turing laid out the specs for a machine called the bomb to break the Enigma encryption, an improved version of the Polish bomb. And by the end of the war, more than 200 bombs were being used at once. Germany never actually caught on that they were breaking all their codes. If you want an in-depth explanation into the Enigma machine and how to defeat it, Computerphile has a fantastic video series all about that. One estimate by Professor Jack Copeland estimates that Turing's work shortened World War II by 2 years. All that is fantastic, and we're all better off for Turing's work. Here's where it gets bad. In January 1952, at age 39, Turing started a romantic relationship with a man named Arnold Murray. Later that same month, Turing's house was robbed by someone Murray knew personally. During the police investigation into the robbery, Turing admitted to the police his relationship with Murray. In response, Turing was charged with gross indecency under UK law and chose to be chemically castrated instead of facing prison time. Due to being charged, he was banned from continuing his cryptographic work and banned from the United States. 2 years later, in June 1964, Turing was found dead at his home. The official story is that, having become depressed due to chemical castration, he killed himself by eating an apple laced with cyanide, possibly making a reference to Snow White. This explanation is disputed, however. The alternative explanation is that Turing was so distracted with his work, as he often was, that he didn't realize he'd created cyanide fumes from one of his lab experiments. Who can really know for sure? In any case, his passing is tragic, and I really wish he had a better ending than that. The story doesn't pick up again for about another 40 years, until August 2009. British programmer John Graham Cumming started a petition urging the British government to apologize for Turing's treatment, and the petition eventually reached 37,000 signatures. Turing received a royal pardon in 2013 by Queen Elizabeth II, and in 2017, a law known informally as the Alan Turing Law was passed to issue retroactive pardons for others charged with homosexuality. In total, 49,000 men have been pardoned through the law. UK Prime Minister Gordon Brown released a statement in 2009 saying, "Thousands of people have come together to demand justice for Alan Turing and recognition of the appalling way he was treated. While Turing was dealt with under the law of the time, and we can't put the clock back, his treatment was, of course, utterly unfair, and I am pleased to have the chance to say how deeply sorry I and we all are for what happened to him. So, on behalf of the British government, and all those who live freely thanks to Alan's work, I am very proud to say, we're sorry. You deserve so much better." Yeah, Turing. You really did. Native Americans are some of the most mistreated people in US history. This goes all the way back to the original British colonists. Most notably, the illegal removal of Native Americans from the American South by US President Andrew Jackson forced 60,000 Native Americans from their homelands. In spite of all that, many Native Americans chose to enlist in the US military during World Wars I and II. This is where we get the specialized role of Code Talkers, which were crucial in the war effort. Chester Nez was one of the original Navajo Code Talkers during World War II, and the only one that published his memoirs, so I'll be focusing on his account. Chester Nez grew up on a Navajo reservation, and it was tough. His family had experienced mistreatment by the US government, who had slaughtered their sheep during the Great Depression. While attending boarding school, his name was changed to Chester, and if caught speaking Navajo, he'd be forced to wash his mouth out with soap. US Marine recruiters came to the reservation in 1942, seeking young men to be code talkers in World War II. You'd think Nez wouldn't be willing to help the US government, given their history. His thoughts were, "I thought about how my people were mistreated, but then I thought this would be my chance to do something for my country." 29 Navajo, including Nez, were tasked with creating a secret code that was secure enough not to be cracked, but fast enough to be encrypted and decrypted in the heat of battle. They couldn't exactly ask to hear a message a second time, and making a mistake in communication could easily be life or death. It wasn't even just the language itself that was unique to them. Navajo culture emphasized talking and retelling through stories passed down through generations. This tradition made it easy for the Navajo to practice for hours and hours on end to memorize their code, quizzing each other constantly. For the code, they ended up using Navajo words to substitute for letters of the Roman alphabet, and they had to make up military terms themselves, like iron fish for submarine. Even before creating the formalized code, a quick test found that the Navajo could encrypt and decrypt a secret message within seconds, whereas the cryptographic equipment took a half hour. That should give you an idea for how valuable they really were in the war effort. The Germans actually got smart about code talkers after the use of Cherokee and Choctaw code talkers in World War I. Germany had sent anthropologists to learn the Navajo language. They didn't get much out of it. If you've ever learned a new language, you know that it's really hard and takes a long time, possibly years. Navajo is said to be a difficult language to learn for an outsider, not related to other languages that people are used to. It is said to be complex in syntax and tonal. For example, the words for medicine and mouth sound very similar, but with different tones. During the war, a non-code talker Navajo soldier was captured by the Japanese and forced to try and interpret the transmissions, no doubt under a huge amount of stress. He later told the code talkers after the war had ended, "I never figured out what you guys, who got me into all that trouble, were saying." In total, more than 400 code talkers served in World War II and were present at many battles, including the Utah D-Day invasion and Iwo Jima, where 6 code talkers worked non-stop for 2 days, relaying 800 total messages, all without error, all in the heat of battle. According to Major Howard Connor, were it not for the Navajos, the Marines would never have taken Iwo Jima. One interesting note is when, in a foxhole, Chester saw in his supplies a bar of soap, the same kind of soap that had been used to wash out his mouth when he'd been caught speaking Navajo. Quote from Nez, "All those years, telling you not to speak Navajo, and then to turn around and asks for help with that same language. It still kind of bothers me." When the war ended, the code talkers were still faced with the same discrimination they had before, and Nez was even told he wasn't a full citizen of the United States when he registered for an identity card in a federal building. Because the Code Talker work was classified, they weren't allowed to talk about their experience. It wasn't until 1968 that the Code Talker program was declassified. Finally, their surviving original Code Talkers were acknowledged and appreciated in 1971 by President Richard Nixon and again in 2001 by President George W. Bush. To this day, the Navajo Code remains as the only military code to never have been cracked. The world is complex. No single person can understand it all, but everyone has some knowledge to contribute. You, the viewer, have your own way of understanding the world through your unique thoughts and experiences, and the world is better off for it. War has typically been the motivating factor that gets nations to look past differences in people and unite together in a common purpose. I speculate that within our lifetime, we'll have different struggles in place of war that are just as deadly, if not more so. And to have any hope of overcoming them, we'll need different kinds of people working together. And that includes potentially uniting with people that are completely different from ourselves. As a final note, a word of warning to any nations, or even just any persons, that would outright reject an entire group of people, be it because of race or something else. They do so at the risk of their own destruction. Thank you for watching and making it to the end of the video. You're awesome, and I really appreciate it. If you'd like to help me out even more, click the like button and leave me a comment with your thoughts. It was a lot of fun researching the really special people in this video, and I'm genuinely interested to learn more about them. Take care of yourself, and I'll talk to you later.